Namaste, everyone. I must confess to you, I had planned to be in England at this time with my family, vacationing in London and then going down to Exeter University and touring Stonehenge. And yes, my first vacation trip to England. But things being as they are, I'm glad that I can still speak with you over Zoom. So let me begin. Today, I'm going to be discussing Zen and Psychedelics. The full title of my presentation, which is actually going to be a chapter in the forthcoming volume on psychedelics and philosophy. It's titled The Unconscious in Zen and Psychedelic Experience, a response to D.T. Suzuki's Zen critique of drug-induced satori. In particular, we'll see that Suzuki is targeting that famous book by Aldous Huxley, The Doors to Perception. And he criticizes it very strongly. And he did so at a conference that was attended by famous Zen masters and Zen scholars. And they all tended to agree with his critique. But actually, I'll be defending Huxley, showing that Suzuki's criticism is totally without warrant, because he's, for the purposes of defending his own position, he's misreading Huxley in a very serious way. But still, it's an exciting and powerful debate which emerged from that. So in this essay, I analyze the function of the unconscious mind in both Zen enlightenment or satori and the psychedelic experience. Now, Zen was introduced to the West, for those of you who don't know, by the lectures and the books of Suzuki Daisetsu Tetaro, but he's commonly known in English as D.T. Suzuki. But in order to adapt Zen Buddhism to his Western audience, what I tried to show is that Suzuki gave Zen a modern psychological reinterpretation based on his Zen doctrine of the unconscious. And that was a totally new interpretation, one unique to him. So first, there's an examination of Suzuki's psychological interpretation, or as it were, reinterpretation of the unconscious, being used as a basis for a new reinterpretation of Zen satori, enlightenment, or kensho, sudden awakening to your own Buddha nature. And then this will be followed by his critique of the drug-induced satori in Aldous Huxley's The Doors to Perception, a book which probably many of you are familiar with. D.T. Suzuki, or again Suzuki, Daisetsu Tetaro, argues that Zen meditation and enlightenment can be understood as an event whereby one becomes conscious of no mind, mushin, no mind, or the unconscious. The key Zen Buddhist term mushin, or in Chinese it's wushin, is commonly translated as no mind, or sometimes empty mind. However, Suzuki argues that psychologically speaking, mushin in today's parlance is best rendered as the unconscious. Just as Suzuki psychologically interprets Zen no mind as the unconscious, he describes the Zen experience of satori, or enlightenment, as awakening to the unconscious. Suzuki proclaims, satori is the reason of Zen, and without it, Zen is not Zen. The sole purpose of Zen is to experience satori. Moreover, he describes satori in psychological terms. Plainly spoken, satori is to realize the unconscious, quoting Suzuki. He adds, as far as the psychology of satori is considered, a sense of the beyond is all that we can say about it. I have called it elsewhere the unconscious. Now, Suzuki develops a cartography, you can say a cartography of the deepest phases of the human mind, a Zen map of the human psyche, as a multi-leveled full spectrum. And it comes in 5 phases. 1, he calls it consciousness, waking ego consciousness. 2, there's semi-consciousness, like Freud's preconscious mind. And then there is the conscious, somewhat like Freudian personal unconsciousness. And 4th, there's the collective unconscious of Carl Jung. But Suzuki claims to have uncovered a deeper level, a more primordial level of the unconscious, and he calls this the cosmic unconscious. Uchu teki muishiki, the cosmic unconscious. So, to quote D.T. Suzuki, he says, psychologically speaking, satori is superconsciousness, or consciousness of the unconscious. The unconscious, however, not to be identified with one psychologically postulated by Freud or Jung, it is what I call the cosmic unconscious. As indicated here, Suzuki's concept of the unconscious is not to be equated with notions of the unconscious postulated by Western psychology, including the individual unconscious of Freudian psychoanalysis, or the collective unconscious of Jungian analytical psychology. But instead, it signifies a deeper transpersonal level of mind that he terms the cosmic unconsciousness. Like Buck's cosmic consciousness, it's where mind and the cosmos have merged, but it's still at the unconscious level prior to satori or enlightenment. So he's calling it the cosmic unconscious. But when the conscious mind becomes fully conscious of the deeper levels of the unconscious, it becomes the cosmic unconscious in Suzuki's scheme. Moreover, as was quoted here, for Suzuki, Zen Satori is that of becoming fully conscious of the cosmic unconscious in superconsciousness. All right, so superconsciousness is the state of fully enlightened Satori, once the conscious mind has broken through into the unconscious and become fully conscious of the unconscious in the superconscious state. Suzuki defines his Zen concept of the cosmic unconscious in such terms as the void, the abyss of absolute nothingness, and emptiness. This unconscious is a metaphysical concept, says Suzuki, and it is through satori that we become fully conscious of the unconscious. He continues, the cosmic unconscious, in terms of space, is emptiness. So his idea of the cosmic unconscious is that it's the domain of emptiness or nothingness or the void. And that, he postulates, is the deepest level of the human mind. He traces back the Zen concept of no mind or no thought as the unconscious to Zen master Huineng, the sixth patriarch of Chinese Chan Zen Buddhism. Huineng says the doctrine of the unconscious was the chief topic of interest in the days of Huineng in China. The unconscious is the Chinese way of describing the realization of emptiness or shunyata. Suzuki's interpretation of the cosmic unconscious as emptiness can further be analyzed in terms of the three bodies of Buddha, central to Mahayana and Tantrayana Buddhism. Okay, there are three dimensions to the mind, or three bodies, according to this doctrine. This doctrine asserts that Buddha has three bodies: the physical or historical body, called Nirmanakaya, that was Gautama Siddhartha the Buddha, and then a subtle, dreamlike energy body of a god or goddess, called Sambhogakaya, and the very subtle wisdom body of emptiness or nothingness, called dharmakaya. The importance of this will become clear later, since Aldous Huxley in The Doors of Perception makes reference to these theories to explain his experience. Now, the depth psychology of Jung uses precisely this three bodies theory as a framework to classify the different levels of the unconscious psyche. According to Jung himself, Freud's personal unconscious of repressed instincts designates the physical level of Nirmanakaya, the embodied level, whereas Jung's own notion of the collective unconscious as the repository of archetype images that organize human experience, it represents that dream-like imaginal realm called Sambhogakaya. However, Suzuki identifies his own Zen concept of the cosmic unconscious with dharmakaya, or wisdom body, signifying the void of emptiness and absolute nothingness. Suzuki further explains his Zen concept of the cosmic unconscious in terms of the school known as Yogacara Buddhism, depth psychology, where the mind is divided into 8 levels. The human mind has 8 strata, the deepest level of which is the storehouse consciousness, Alaya Vijnana, which is the Buddhist equivalent to the unconscious mind. For transpersonal psychologist Ken Wilber, the 8 levels of consciousness in Yogacara Buddhism, as presented by D.T. Suzuki, altogether represents what he calls the spectrum of consciousness, the full spectrum of consciousness. Okay, so those 3 Buddha bodies that we just discussed, to make it clear in a pictorial way, the famous Buddhist who brought Buddhism to Tibet was known as Guru Rinpoche Padmasambhava. But other portrayals of him show him dissolving into a dream-like rainbow body. That's Sambhogakaya. And then that in turn dissolves into clear light. That clear light bliss of the void of emptiness, that's the dharmakaya. Okay, in Zen and Japanese culture, D.T. Suzuki maintains that Zen Buddhism in Japan culminated in a Zen aestheticism, which historically developed from out of Japanese art culture, he says. According to Suzuki's philosophical psychology, Zen aestheticism is itself rooted in no mind, mushin, or what he calls the cosmic unconscious, which functions as the principle of creativity and the source of all Zen-inspired arts. Suzuki says, the cosmic unconscious is the principle of creativity itself. All creative works of art come from the fountainhead of the cosmic unconscious. Moreover, he asserts that no mind, as the cosmic unconscious, is where all the arts and crafts merge into Zen. Suzuki further argues that the Zen-inspired arts, including swordsmanship, ink painting, no drama, haiku poetry, and the tea ceremony, they all spring from their source in the cosmic unconscious, which, as the abyss of absolute nothingness, is the inexhaustible fountain of unlimited creative possibilities. Maybe you can see this book. It's called Zen Life. This is a picture of D.T. Suzuki. All right, and there's a new movie that came out. It's called A Zen Life, D.T. Suzuki. You can purchase this DVD, maybe even get it streaming on YouTube or something, but this is a DVD about the life and teachings of D.T. Suzuki. It's just fantastic, and I'll make reference to this shortly. Well, let's get to his critique on drug-induced satori. Again, satori means sudden enlightenment or instantaneous awakening. First, I'll begin with a book published by a scholar, Eric Cunningham. It's called Hallucinating the End of History, Zen, Nishida Kitaro, and the Psychedelic Eschaton. Here, Cunningham explains the term psychedelic, as originally coined by Dr. Humphrey Osmond in 1957. He says that this term, psychedelic, was intended to refer to a quality that could bring to the fore whatever was latent in the subconscious. So right from the start, psychedelic, the word psychedelic was connected to the idea of manifesting subconscious contents ordinarily hidden from the conscious mind. Cunningham argues that D.T. Suzuki was the one who provided a new Zen terminology capable of describing psychedelic experience, otherwise thought to be perhaps ineffable by many. And this led to a fusion of cultural vocabularies. For instance, when the Harvard psychologist Timothy Leary referred to the psychedelic experience of LSD as drug-induced satori, hence the title of my paper. D.T. Suzuki, however, has strongly criticized any notion of drug-induced satori, wherein Zen enlightenment is mistakenly conflated with hallucinatory experience produced by psychedelic drugs. Now, as I indicated at the start of my talk, D.T. Suzuki, he started the first really great English journal dedicated to Mahayana Buddhism. It's called The Eastern Buddhist. And even today, it's still being published many, many decades later. He was teaching at Otani University in Kyoto at the time. So he organized a large conference on Zen and psychedelic drugs. Attending were many famous Zen masters and Zen scholars and popularizers of Zen too. Alan Watts was there. And here Suzuki gave this keynote address where he's very strongly criticizing this. Again, it's a conflation between true, authentic, pure Zen enlightenment, satori, and the fabrications of psychedelic experience. So let's look at his argument here. Suzuki has very strongly criticized the notion of drug-induced satori, wherein Zen enlightenment is mistakenly conflated with hallucinations produced by psychedelic drugs. In his preface to The Gateless Barrier, that's a famous book of koans or riddles that Rinzai Zen uses to try to trigger off instant enlightenment. In The Gateless Barrier, translated by R.H. Blythe, Suzuki claims that Zen, I'm quoting Suzuki, Zen has been subject to very gross misunderstanding and fantastic misinterpretation by those who have never actually had the Zen experience. Among such interpreters, we count the modern addicts to uses of so-called psychedelic drugs. For example, LSD, mescaline, and psilocybin. Suzuki continues, that these visions have really nothing to do with Zen at all, psychologically or spiritually, is ascertainable when one carefully studies, for instance, case 19 of the gateless barrier. Case 19, one of the famous koans of the book, one of the most famous koans of all time. One of Suzuki's recurrent themes is that Zen Mushin, or no mind, as the cosmic unconscious, is identical to the ordinary mind, Heijoshin, of everyday life. Suzuki here attempts to distinguish the illusions of hallucinatory, drug-induced psychedelic experiences from authentic Zen experience by reference to this above mentioned case 19 of the gateless barrier, which teaches ordinary mind is the way of Zen. In Japanese, Heijoshin Korido. In Chinese, Ding Zhang Xin Shi Dao. Ordinary mind is the way, or everyday life is the Tao. That's what's characteristic of Zen. So let me further clarify. The teaching of ordinary mind is the key doctrine characterizing Zen mysticism. Zen does not seek transcendence in an otherworldly paradise, but ultimately returns to everyday life. For this reason, Zen does not value fantastic visions, dreams, and hallucinations, but instead endeavors to see the ordinary things of nature and everyday life as they really are in their emptiness suchness. The Zen doctrine of ordinary mind is exemplified by the traditional Japanese tea ceremony, chado. Have you heard of that? The Japanese tea ceremony is well known today. It cultivates an aesthetic experience of wabi. Wabi, the simple beauty of the ordinary, the plain, and the everyday. In the philosophical psychology of Suzuki, Zen, no mind, or the cosmic unconscious, in its function as ordinary mind, is the deeper subliminal awareness that underlies all of the commonplace activities of our everyday life, such as eating when hungry and drinking when thirsty. Likewise, in Suzuki's Zen aestheticism, it is no mind, or the cosmic unconscious, acting as the ordinary mind that guides the lightning fast sword of the samurai, the spontaneous brushworks of the ink wash painter, the effortless gestures of a no actor, and the graceful movements of the tea master performing the tea ceremony. For Suzuki then, realization of Zen Satori as opening to the cosmic unconscious itself culminates in an illumination of the quotidian, thereby to realize the ordinary as extraordinary. Now, at this conference that he organized at Otani University, all of the Zen masters, the Zen teachers, the Zen scholars pretty much agreed with him that true Zen at its highest level is ordinary mind and therefore must be quite different than the psychedelic experience. By the way, in a special edition of his journal, The Eastern Buddhist, the proceedings from this conference have been published, but very recently they've been republished in this very wonderful anthology, The Selected Works of D.T. Suzuki, Volume 3 on Comparative Religions. Suzuki's critique of Zen-induced satori can be found in this volume. It's a pretty recent work, so it's easily obtainable now. The Zen-colored notion of pure experience, devoid of subject-object dualism, as articulated by D.T. Suzuki and his closest friend, the modern Japanese philosopher Nishida Kitaro, was itself derived from the radical empiricism of William James. Now here I'm discussing this famous idea popularized by William James of a pure experience. Well, this deeply influenced how D.T. Suzuki interpreted Zen enlightenment. Also, Nishida Kitaro, the founder of modern Japanese philosophy, uses pure experience to articulate in Western terms what is Zen enlightenment. But the one who most influenced both of their understanding of pure experience is William James, from essays on radical empiricism and also varieties of religious experience. Okay. Also, Suzuki's key notion of Zen satori as insight into the cosmic unconscious was influenced by James's psychological account of the mystical experience of cosmic consciousness as an influx of the subconscious into consciousness, articulated in his 1900 work, The Varieties of Religious Experience. While William James was delivering those lectures at Harvard University, D.T. Suzuki was also at Harvard, and he was a guest lecturer, and he immediately had learned about William James's theory of pure experience. And he decided, well, this is just an amazing way to reinterpret Zen enlightenment, and also James's idea that there's an outpouring of the subconscious into the conscious mind in the mystical experience of cosmic consciousness. Suzuki decided, well, this is an excellent modern way to interpret Zen enlightenment. However, in this very same work, in Varieties of Religious Experience, William James also discusses his own experiments with mind-altering intoxicants, including peyote, used in the Native American religious ceremonies, as well as anesthetic pharmaceutical drugs such as ether and nitrous oxide. Have you all read William James's Varieties of Religious Experience? Well, here's a very famous quote from his chapter on cosmic unconsciousness and mysticism from the Varieties of Religious Experience. James says, nitrous oxide and ether, especially nitrous oxide, when sufficiently diluted with air, stimulate the mystical consciousness in an extraordinary degree. Depth beyond depth of truth seem revealed to the inhaler. He's inhaling it through a tank. In the nitrous oxide trance, we have a genuine metaphysical revelation. In the proceedings from a symposium on Zen and psychedelics that were published in the Eastern Buddhist, October 1971, an academic English language journal founded by D.T. Suzuki himself, contains Suzuki's essay titled Religion and Drugs, wherein he underscores the vast differences between genuine Zen satori and the psychedelic experience. Now, Suzuki begins his essay with the insight. Strangely, religion and drugs are closely associated. Karl Marx, who founded the school of communism, called religion an opiate. But for that matter, the communism which he advocated is also a kind of religion and therefore a drug, no doubt. Suzuki especially discusses here what he calls mystical drugs. Mystical drugs or psychedelics. By mystical drugs, I refer to soma, used in the Vedic Indian scriptures, hashish amongst the Arab Sufis, peyote among the Native American Indians and their rituals, and so on. Alcohol may be included. In Japan, sake is offered to the gods. However, sake has yet to produce the sort of hallucinatory images induced by taking peyote, hashish, LSD, and so forth. It is to peyote and other related mystical, that is psychedelic drugs, that I want to give close attention here. Suzuki adds, chemical analysis of peyote has recently led to the development of various drugs in the United States, and of course Europe as well, among which the most well-known has become LSD. For Suzuki, however, mystical drugs such as LSD and other psychedelics do not lead to Zen enlightenment, but only give rise to Maya-like hallucinations. This is his basic claim. The main target of Suzuki's criticism is the famous book, The Doors to Perception by Aldous Huxley. I'm sure some of you must have read it. Okay, here it is. The Doors to Perception. Now, Suzuki's essay, Zen and Drugs, goes on to criticize Aldous Huxley's The Doors to Perception, an account of Huxley's pioneering experiments with mescaline, the active ingredient of the peyote cactus plant taken as a sacrament for millennia in the sacred rituals practiced by Native Americans. Suzuki claims that the hallucinations induced by mescaline reported by Huxley have no connection at all with the authentic Zen experience of satori, and that those who think so are totally deluded. This is a quote, one out of many similar quotes from D.T. Suzuki's article criticizing drug-induced satori. Suzuki says, in his book, The Doors of Perception, Aldous Huxley described his own experience with the drug mescaline. He saw a hitherto unknown world upon opening this door. He then tried to relate this experience with that of Zen. Though Mr. Huxley had taken an interest in Zen, he did not have the guidance of a Zen master. He thus sets forth to writing a detailed description of the world of illusory vision brought on by mescaline, mistaking this for true Zen enlightenment, claims Suzuki. Suzuki criticizes, yes, according to Suzuki then, Huxley mistakes the world of illusory vision brought on by mescaline with the true experience of Zen satori, or sudden awakening. Suzuki continues, Zen experience is quite often confused, even by some so-called Zen experts, with the hallucinatory state of makkyo. This is a Japanese word, makkyo. The main point of Suzuki's essay is that it is a mistake to confuse Zen satori, or enlightenment, with the illusory state of delirium known as makkyo, and then to further identify makkyo with the hallucinations of psychedelic experience, thereby to erroneously infer that Zen satori and psychedelic experience are the same. Makkyo means a kind of Zen mental illness, or when you practice Zen meditation very strenuously, sometimes a breaking point is achieved and you start to hallucinate wildly. But it's not a good thing for them. It's a bad thing. And you want to let go of those hallucinations and return to genuine concentration without distractions. So makkyo means a kind of demonic state of hallucination. For Suzuki, mind-altering psychedelic drugs produce hallucinations, but they do not lead to Zen no mind, which is the ordinary mind of the true self. Suzuki criticizes Huxley's The Doors to Perception in an effort to discredit any association between Zen and drugs. He thereby endeavors to distinguish the artificial drug-induced hallucination of mescaline, allegedly described by Huxley, from the natural, the pure, and authentic Zen experience of satori, which is the realization of dharmakaya, as the emptiness, suchness of things just as they are, realized by the ordinary mind of the true self in everyday life. However, it is clear to me that D.T. Suzuki has seriously misrepresented Huxley for the sake of his argument. Okay, this is what Aldous Huxley really says by my reading. At the outset of his work, The Doors to Perception, Huxley himself reports, this is a quote from Huxley, "The other world to which mescaline admitted me was not the world of visions. It existed out there in what could be seen with my eyes open. The great change was in the realm of objective fact." And next, Huxley emphasizes that his spiritual experience under the influence of mescaline was the Ichtigkeit or isness of Meister Eckhart, the great via negativa apophatic Christian mystic who teaches that Christian mysticism should culminate in a breakthrough beyond God to the Godhead of nothingness, further emphasizing that the Godhead of nothingness is the isness of things. So Suzuki feels that, yes, Meister Eckhart and Christian mysticism of Meister Eckhart and Zen mysticism converge at this point. Huxley discusses the Zen traditions of Huineng and Hakuin, famous Zen masters, the Japanese Zen landscape painting and haiku poetry, as well as Zen mysticism. In fact, Huxley regularly makes reference to the Zen mysticism of D.T. Suzuki himself to clarify his experiences under mescaline. Indeed, in an effort to describe his psychedelic experience, Huxley adopts the Zen vocabulary of D.T. Suzuki, including dharmakaya or dharma body, the wisdom body of emptiness, suchness, not self or no self, the void, nothingness, a mind, liberation, moksha, and nirvana. As said by Zen scholar Alan Watts in his book on psychedelic experience, titled The Joyous Cosmology, Adventures in the Chemistry of Consciousness, the Westerner must borrow such words as samadhi or moksha from the Hindus or satori or kensho from the Japanese to describe the psychedelic experience of oneness with the universe. For most Westerners in the 60s, Watts claimed that when the mind merges with the cosmos itself, psychocosmic homologization occurs. It seems to be beyond our ability to explain, but he says at this point, we need to use such words as what the Hindus call samadhi, that ecstatic trance state, or moksha, liberation and emancipation, satori, sudden enlightenment, and kensho, abrupt insight into your own Buddha nature. As Huxley begins to experience the surging psychotropic effects of mescaline, to remember as the book continues, he ponders a Zen koan, a paradoxical question is a koan, from Suzuki's own writings. He's quoting Suzuki. He's trying to comprehend the astonishing experience unfolding in front of him. And he says, I remembered a passage I had read in one of Suzuki's essays. What is the dharmakaya? What is the dharma body of the Buddha? The dharma body is another way for Suzuki of saying mind, or suchness, or the void, or Godhead, he says. The question is asked by a Zen, asked in a Zen monastery to an earnest and bewildered student. What is the dharmakaya? What is the true dharma body of the Buddha? Is the question, the koan. To which the Zen master responds, it's the hedge at the bottom of the garden. might seem puzzling at first, but as Huxley clarifies, this means that the Dharma body of the Buddha, or the dharmakaya of emptiness, refers to the concrete particular things of everyday life in their suchness or thisness or isness, their hyasati. In this context, Huxley emphasizes that his mystical experience of mysterium tremendum induced by mescaline intoxication was not characterized by illusory dreams or visions or hallucinations, not by delirium, but by an immediate experience of the Dharma body of Buddha as the void. Huxley says, this is a great quote by Huxley. He says, in their art, no less than in their religion, Taoists as well as Zen Buddhists looked beyond visions and hallucinations to the void, and through the void at the 10,000 things of objective reality. He couldn't be plainer, right? He's saying not only in Zen, but in Taoist mysticism, they aren't looking to induce visions or dreams or hallucinations, but they look beyond that. They look beyond the visions to enter into the void, and beyond the void to the 10,000 things, the ordinary things of the world, in order to apprehend them in the objective reality of their emptiness, suchness. Thus, in the phenomenological account of his mescaline-induced psychedelic experience, Huxley never reports artificially produced hallucinations, but always describes his encounter with the void as the dharmakaya of emptiness, suchness, wherein the 10,000 things are revealed just as they are in their isness. Moreover, Huxley describes this perception of things in their isness as the Zen experience of not self. He says this is how we ought to really see all the time how things really are. If one always saw like this, one would never want to do anything else, just looking, just being the divine not self or no self of a flower, of a book, of a chair, of flannel clothing. I was now a not self, simultaneously perceiving and being the not self of the things around me. So, in other words, in Huxley's book, he doesn't describe this mescaline-induced experience as one of hallucinations, dreams, and visions at all, but instead emphasizes, like in Zen and in Taoism, he perceived things as they are, presencing in their emptiness, suchness. Relates this experience not only to Zen mysticism and Taoist meditation practice, but also the Christian mysticism of Meister Eckhart, as cited before. Huxley further explains his understanding of Suzuki Zen mysticism in a June 1957 letter to Dr. Humphrey Osmond, included in a collection of writings on psychedelic experience entitled The Moksha. Yes, Moksha is another book by Huxley, and all of his best writings on the psychedelic experience were collected there. So I can recommend you getting a copy of Moksha. Moksha means emancipation. Here is D.T. Suzuki in his letter to Dr. Humphrey Osmond. I saw my dear old friend D.T. Suzuki in New York City. Have you ever read his most recent book on mysticism, Christian and Buddhist? It is very good, and even better is a little pamphlet published by the London Buddhist Society called The Essence of Buddhism. This last is really admirable. It makes one realize how much subtler these Far Eastern Buddhists were in matters of psychology than anyone in the West. They know all about existential experiences and the horrors of the human situation as described by Jean-Paul Sartre and Camus and the rest. And they know how to come and they know how to come through to the other side. where every relative manifests absolute suchness, and where suchness, emptiness, is identical with the Mahakaruna, the great compassion. This is an interesting letter because it shows actually Huxley was very good friends with Suzuki. When Suzuki, during the 50s, became so influential in his public lectures given at Columbia University, Huxley met with him many times. So when in fact D.T. Suzuki is criticizing Huxley so strongly, he was criticizing his dear friend Aldous Huxley. So Huxley emphasizes that in Suzuki's Zen philosophy, psychology, and mysticism, the aim is to counter the absurdity, the anguish, the nihilistic despair of the human situation described by existentialism, not by escaping into a world of hallucinations, but through direct realization of the emptiness, suchness of things, and compassion for all sentient beings. Huxley goes on to explain psychedelic experience in terms of a psychology of the unconscious. Okay, here is where Huxley and Suzuki are coming very close, because both are trying to use a doctrine of the unconscious to explain enlightenment, mystical experience of cosmic consciousness. In his analysis, in Huxley's analysis of the effects of mescaline on the human mind, Huxley describes how the psyche can be divided into various layers, including consciousness, the personal unconscious, the collective unconscious with its archetypes, and the world of visionary experience. This is Doors to Perception, page 84, 85. But he clarifies, by the world of visionary experience, he does not refer to illusory hallucinations, but instead to the beatific vision of light, or what in the Tibetan Book of the Dead is called the clear light of the void. Moreover, by the vision of light, he refers both to the light of the mind as well as the radiance of all phenomena shining from within, radiating and glittering and shining into manifestation. For Huxley, the mystical illumination experience of dharmakaya as the clear light void is experiencing consciously something of that which unconsciously is always with us. This is a core doctrine of Suzuki. The cosmic unconscious is always experiencing the ultimate void, but it remains unconscious to the ego self. And it is only upon achieving breakthrough of satori that one becomes fully conscious of the cosmic unconscious in superconsciousness. Huxley further states, the way to superconsciousness is through the subconscious. And the way, or at least one of the ways to the subconscious, is through psychedelics, through chemistry of the cells. While he discusses a variety of methods for bypassing, his famous term, the cerebral reducing valve. There's so much information pouring in from mind at large. This welter of data is overwhelming us. So we have the cerebral reducing valve, a term he gets from Henry Bergson, which filters out excess information so that we can just practically focus on ordinary things of life. So we can bypass the cerebral reducing valve through meditation, fasting, isolation, deep breathing, sensory deprivation, chanting, hypnosis. However, Huxley views mescaline and other psychedelics as the most direct and rapid means of access to the subconscious and the superconscious, and from there to dharmakaya emptiness as clear light of the void. Thus, like D.T. Suzuki's Zen notion of satori as awakening to the cosmic unconscious, Huxley analyzes mystical experience of illumination as opening to the depths of subconscious, unconscious, and superconscious levels of the mind. But as Huxley states above, the way to the superconscious is through the subconscious, and one way to the subconscious is to alter brain chemistry through psychedelic catalysts such as mescaline. Well, here's a good sidebar. In this new movie called A Zen Life, D.T. Suzuki, please try to see this film if you can. Suzuki authored a book called Zen and Psychoanalysis, and he became good friends with many famous psychoanalysts and psychiatrists of his day. And in fact, he had many of those as his personal physicians. Well, in this film, several of these well-known psychiatrists say that for decades, Suzuki begged them to get LSD or some other psychedelic for him. He constantly begged them for psychedelics. He said, here I am pretending I know the difference between Zen and psychedelic experience when I haven't had them. But by this point, he was almost 90 years old. Suzuki continued to be very popular, very active into his 70s, into his 80s, into his mid 90s. Very vital, very clear, very profound, even when he's 95. He was almost 90, and so they always declined, saying, well, we're worried about your high blood pressure. So in fact, he never did have the experience, but he had the strong aspiration to take LSD or mescaline or psilocybin or some other psychedelic catalyst, and then to see how it would affect his insight into reality and how it might deepen his own Zen satori. So, to be more specific, finally, it should be noted that in the 2006 documentary film I just mentioned, A Zen Life, D.T. Suzuki, Mrs. Okamura Mihoko, the longtime personal secretary for Suzuki until the end of his life, reveals that at 85 years of age, after hearing so much about similarities between Zen satori and LSD-induced psychedelic experience, Suzuki often requested LSD. Moreover, the psychiatrist, Dr. Albert Stunkard, MD, a serious Zen practitioner, and D.T. Suzuki's longtime personal physician in Japan, reports how Suzuki frequently requested LSD, but those around him always declined, using the excuse of his high blood pressure, fearing that the psychedelic experience of LSD would be too overwhelming for Suzuki in his later years. So, practically speaking, in terms of techniques, let's just end this by saying that we've discussed the structure of the mind and the unconscious for Suzuki and Aldous Huxley. But in terms of techniques, in this essay, it was demonstrated how D.T. Suzuki reinterprets Zen Satori, awakening, in terms of his modern philosophical psychology of the unconscious. So, to quote him, some think that there is still an unknown region in consciousness. It is sometimes called the unconscious or the subconscious. I call it the cosmic unconscious. Now, satori is the popular name given for this opening or this awakening to the cosmic unconscious. But similar to D.T. Suzuki's notion of Zen satori as opening to the cosmic unconscious, Huxley also analyzes the beatific experience of mystical illumination as an opening the doors to our unconscious mind, thereby to achieve superconsciousness. Remember, both Huxley and D.T. Suzuki refer to this becoming conscious of the deeper subconscious as a kind of superconsciousness. But at the level of practice, it has been seen that, in Freudian psychoanalysis, the id or individual unconscious, as as the boiling kettle of repressed libidinal instincts can be accessed through interpretation of dreams. While Jungian depth psychology encounters the collective unconscious and its archetypes through a technique he called active imagination, a kind of controlled lucid dreaming. D.T. Suzuki, however, advocates the Rinzai Zen koan practice of focusing the whole body-mind on the keyword mu, the most famous koan ever, mu, meaning nothingness or no. Concentrating on mu in the lower abdomen, the hara center, as the quickest path for realizing satori as opening to the cosmic unconscious, which he defines in Buddhist terms as the non-dual void of nothingness or emptiness, suchness. And indeed, using the phrase made famous by Aldous Huxley's The Doors to Perception, Suzuki explains how concentration on the mu koan triggers Zen satori as a breakthrough to the cosmic unconscious, at which time, he says, the doors of perception are fully opened. Huxley, like Suzuki, endeavors to access this lowest region of the subliminal mind, going beneath the individual and collective levels down to the transpersonal and superconscious levels of the unconscious mind. But as said by Huxley, the way to the superconscious is through the subconscious, and the most direct way to the subconscious is by altering brain chemistry with psychedelic catalysts such as mescaline. Thus, while Suzuki claims that concentration on mu or some other koan is the shortcut path to sudden enlightenment as opening to the cosmic unconscious in superconsciousness, for Huxley, it is the chemically induced psychedelic experience that most quickly opens wide the doors to our unconscious mind, the deepest level of which is the supercosmic void of emptiness, nothingness, and silence. Well, I'll just mention briefly for myself. I thought that Suzuki's critique of his Zen critique of the drug-induced enlightenment experience, which he imputes to Huxley's The Doors to Perception, was a serious misreading, maybe intentionally so, in order to fortify his argument and his view. But Huxley's book has got to be probably the most influential book in the countercultural revolution of the 1960s, in the turn towards interest in psychedelics. For myself, a little bit of biography. When I was just out of junior high school, into high school, my favorite rock and roll group was The Doors. And I think I was 15. And it was announced that The Doors were playing at the Felt Forum of Madison Square Garden in New York City. So with my friend down the street, we went and saw The Doors. But I had read in a book that The Doors and Jim Morrison, they named their group The Doors because of their great love for Huxley's book, The Doors to Perception. So we decided it was time to become initiated, and we both got a supply. And for the first time, we took the mescaline that had been explained in The Doors to Perception, and we attended The Doors concert in Madison Square Garden. And all I can say is the next day, I was a new person. I think everyone around me commented that I was a totally different person, a new person. I saw everything different after that experience. So I had a particular affection for Aldous Huxley's The Doors to Perception. And so I wanted to at least clarify what Aldous Huxley actually says about his psychedelic experience in that book. Again, my overall statement is Suzuki claims that the main error is that Huxley and those who follow him are making a great category mistake. They mistake the illusions, the hallucinations, the visions, the delirium, the dreams of mescaline and psychedelic experience with the pure and genuine, authentic, true Zen satori, enlightenment experience. But Huxley does not ever describe visions and emphasizes, in fact, that he goes beyond visions to experience things in their emptiness suchness. Also, I found it fascinating that Suzuki was especially influenced by the chapter on mystical experience from the varieties of religious experience by his friend, William James, who he met at Harvard University. And in the same section where he's describing such ideas as the pure experience and a mystical experience of a cosmic consciousness, as psychology explained, as the influx, sudden influx of the subconscious into the conscious mind. He also explains his pioneering experiences with mescaline, but Suzuki just filters that side out. I wanted to end with, let's say, bumper music. How do you describe the experience that William James tries to describe phenomenologically when it seems to be ineffable, beyond the capacity of logical categories to articulate? The nitrous oxide experience, which was William James's major portal into the unknown, he says, he thought to be ineffable. But I wanted to play you, to end this talk, just a minute of a song by Tame Impala, a contemporary psychedelic rock group. Their song is called Nangs, N-A-N-G-S, which is an Australian nickname for nitrous oxide experience. Okay, so please relax and float down the stream and surrender to the void, and just listen to 1 or 2 minutes of Nangs by Tame Impala from their album Currents. I'm going to share screen with you. Yeah. What happened, Andrew? Something happened.
Just want to hit play, Steve.
What's that, Andrew?
Go ahead and hit the play button.
Well, it seems to have vanished into the void. Here we go. Nangs by Tame Impala. Their synesthetic depiction through sight and sound of the nitrous oxide experience. Hi, Andrew.